vampires are real? Well, if not, maybe these stories can persuade you otherwise. Today we delve deep into the world of vampires, those enigmatic creatures of the night that have haunted our nightmares for centuries. From the hallowed halls of Washington, D.C., where a president becomes an unexpected hunter, to a quaint English village where a young boy's tales take a dark turn, and finally to the heart of Rhode Island, where a family's tragedy becomes a town's terror. But remember, in the world of the supernatural, not everything is as it seems. Two of these tales are woven from the threads of imagination, while one is hauntingly true. Can you see through our tricks and pick out the true tale? If you like eerie stories of the paranormal, strange and bizarre, you're in the right place. Hit the subscribe button so you never miss when we release a new video. Now, let's begin. Story 1: Reflections of Deceit. In the heart of Washington, D.C., amidst the political turmoil and the looming Civil War, a secret war was being waged, a war against the undead. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, was not just a statesman and a leader. He was also known in the shadows as the Vampire Hunter. The Freemasons, a secretive society to which Lincoln was deeply connected, had been monitoring the influx of immigrants into the country. Among the many seeking a new life in the land of the free, there were those who hid a dark secret. They were vampires. These creatures of the night had been fleeing persecution in Europe, and America's vast landscapes provided the perfect cover for their nefarious activities. Lincoln's involvement in this clandestine battle began when he was approached by a senior member of the Freemasons. They presented him with evidence that not only were vampires infiltrating American society, but they were also gaining positions of power within the very heart of the government. The most alarming revelation was that one of Lincoln's own advisors was suspected of being these immortal beings. The suspected advisor, Nathaniel Blackwood, a man of immense wealth and influence. Blackwood was never seen during the day and held his meetings in dimly lit rooms, often shrouded in shadows. His pale complexion and sharp, predatory gaze were telltale signs, but it was his aversion to sunlight that raised the most suspicions. In the heart of Washington, D.C., away from the prying eyes of the public, President Abraham Lincoln often sought solace at a secluded lake not far from the White House. The serene waters, surrounded by tall trees, provided a tranquil escape from the burdens of leadership, especially during the tumultuous times of the Civil War. Lincoln found a simple pleasure in skipping rocks across the lake, the ripples distorting his reflection in the moonlit water. One evening, as the weight of the war pressed heavily on his shoulders, Lincoln invited Lord Blackwood to join him at the lake just off the White House campus. His insights into the war were invaluable, and Lincoln, though wary, had come to rely on him. As they walked along the lake's edge, the two men discussed the war's progress, strategies, and the sacrifices being made. Lincoln, lost in thought, began to skip rocks, each one dancing across the water, creating ripples that shimmered in the moonlight. Wanting to lighten the mood, he turned to Blackwood with a challenge. "Ever tried skipping rocks, Lord Blackwood? It's quite therapeutic." Blackwood, caught off guard by the informal request, hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I can't say I have, Mr. President, but I'm willing to give it a try." As Blackwood bent down to pick a suitable stone from the water's edge, Lincoln noticed something that sent a chill down his spine. The moonlight clearly illuminated the lake, casting reflections of the surrounding trees and even Lincoln himself. But Blackwood had no reflection. The realization hit Lincoln like a ton of bricks. The rumors, the whispers among the Freemasons about vampires infiltrating the highest echelons of power were true. Lincoln's heart raced as he processed the chilling revelation. Every tale he'd heard, every warning from the Freemasons, it all came rushing back. He knew he had to act swiftly. Blackwood, sensing the change in Lincoln's demeanor, straightened up, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. "Is something the matter, Mr. President?" Blackwood asked, his voice dripping with a coldness that hadn't been there before. Lincoln, thinking quickly, feigned a chuckle. "Just marveling at your rock-skipping technique, Lord Blackwood. Perhaps you'd like to try again a bit further out." Blackwood, though wary, stepped closer to the water's edge. As he bent down once more, Lincoln seized the opportunity. Using all his strength, he lunged at Blackwood, pushing him into the moonlit waters of the lake. The vampire let out a guttural scream, thrashing violently. The legends had spoken of the purifying power of natural water against the undead, and as Blackwood struggled, his form began to disintegrate, consumed by a bluish flame. Lincoln stepped back, panting heavily, watching as the waters calmed, leaving no trace of the vampire lord. The threat had been neutralized, but Lincoln knew that this was just one battle in a war that raged in the shadows. Returning to the White House, Lincoln burned all correspondence and records related to Blackwood, ensuring that the vampire's influence would be erased from history, but he himself would never forget that fateful night by the lake, and the secret duty he bore as both the leader of a nation and a guardian against the darkness. And so in the annals of hidden history, Abraham Lincoln was not just the savior of the Union, but also a protector against the supernatural, a true vampire hunter. Story 2: The Vampire's Pupil. In the heart of 1870s England, in a quaint village nestled amidst rolling hills and dense woods, the Worthington family resided in a grand manor. The family was well respected, and their son Edmund was the apple of their eye. A curious boy of 10, Edmund had a penchant for adventure and a vivid imagination. However, one fateful evening, his tales took a dark turn. "Mama, Papa," Edmund whispered one night over dinner, his voice quivering. "A vampire visits me every night." His parents exchanged worried glances, but assumed it was just another of their son's wild stories. "Every night, you say?" his father asked, trying to keep his tone light. Edmund nodded, his eyes wide with fear. "He stands by my window, watching me. I can see his pale face and those red eyes." The Worthingtons, though concerned, attributed this to a child's overactive imagination. But over the next fortnight, Edmund began to exhibit peculiar behavior. He refused to step out during the day, claiming the sunlight hurt his eyes. His once rosy cheeks turned pale, and he developed a peculiar taste for raw meat. Most startlingly, Edmund began to display an intelligence far beyond his years, discussing complex topics with an eerie maturity. One chilly morning, the Worthington household was plunged into chaos. Edmund was nowhere to be found. His room, usually messy with toys and books, was eerily pristine. The window stood open, curtains billowing in the cold morning breeze. The village rallied together, searching every nook and cranny, but Edmund had vanished without a trace. Days turned into weeks, and hope began to wane. The Worthington Manor, once filled with laughter, was now shrouded in sorrow. One evening, as the sun cast its golden hues, turning the sky to twilight, Mr. and Mrs. Worthington sat in their living room, lost in their grief. A movement outside caught their eye. Standing outside their window was a tall, shadowy figure in a trench coat. Beside him was a familiar face, their beloved Edmund. Overwhelmed with relief, they rushed outside. "Edmund!" Mrs. Worthington cried, tears streaming down her face. But as they approached, they noticed something amiss. Edmund's once bright eyes were now cold and distant, his face devoid of emotion. "Mama, Papa," he said in a voice that was chillingly calm, "I am no longer your son." Before they could react, the tall figure stepped forward, his eyes a deep shade of crimson. With inhuman strength, he pushed the Worthingtons away, shielding Edmund. The couple watched in horror as the mysterious man and their son disappeared into the thick woods, the darkness swallowing them whole. The village would whisper tales of that fateful night for generations, a chilling reminder of the boy who was taken by the vampire and the love that couldn't save him. Story 3: Mercy's Shadow. The quaint town of Exeter, Rhode Island, nestled amidst picturesque landscapes and bathed in the warm glow of the 1890s, held a dark secret. The Brown family, a seemingly ordinary clan, were enduring what appeared to be a curse. One by one, family members were succumbing to the clutches of the dreaded tuberculosis, or as locals whispered with dread, the consumption. The disease ate away at its victims, draining their vitality, leaving them pale and lifeless. George Brown, the patriarch, watched in helpless agony as first his wife Mary, then his daughter Mary Olive, and finally his son Edwin, all fell prey to the disease. But the death that shattered the community was that of Mercy Lena Brown, George's vibrant and youthful daughter. Her passing was sudden and the grief was profound. The vibrant 19-year-old had been full of life, her laughter often echoing in the town square. However, a sinister whisper soon began to spread among the townsfolk, turning their mourning into fear. As Edwin, still living but weakening daily from the consumption, began to recount nightmarish visions of his sister Mercy sitting on his chest, drawing the life out of him, panic took root. Hushed conversations in dimly lit rooms, the shadow of superstition and age-old beliefs about the undead began to take hold. Many began to theorize that Mercy, though dead, was still among them, not as a peaceful spirit but as a vampire. The terror became so palpable that the town, in its desperation, urged George Brown to take drastic action. Their belief was that one of the deceased family members was not truly at rest and was causing the illness that plagued Edwin. The solution was grim: to exhume the bodies of the deceased and inspect them for signs of vampirism. On a chilling March morning, a group of townsfolk, accompanied by George, gathered at the cemetery. The graves of the Brown family were dug up. While the bodies of Mary and Mary Olive showed the expected decay of time, it was Mercy's corpse that sent shivers down their spines. It appeared strangely preserved, with a haunting ruddiness to her cheeks, but the sight that confirmed their darkest fears was the blood that seemed to be present in her heart. The air grew thick with tension as the town's elders, with grim faces, declared Mercy the vampire. Believing that her heart was the source of the evil, they burnt it to ashes right there on that cold, desolate hill. In an act of desperation, they mixed the ashes with water and gave it to the ailing Edwin to drink, clinging to the hope that this macabre remedy would break the curse and save him. However, fate had other plans. Edwin's condition worsened, and within 2 months he too passed away, taking with him the last vestiges of hope and plunging the Brown family into deeper despair. Today, as the winds of autumn whistle through the trees of Exeter, they seem to carry with them the echoes of a time long past and the mournful sighs of a girl named Mercy. Thank you for embarking on this dark journey with us, as we delved into tales of the undead and the mysterious world of vampires. Now the moment of truth. Which of these tales is grounded in reality, and which are the products of a dark imagination? As intriguing as the idea of Abraham Lincoln moonlighting as a vampire hunter might be, this tale is purely fictional. While there is a novel and movie titled Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, there is no historical evidence supporting the claim that the 16th president of the U.S. ever engaged in battle with the undead. Our second story, of a young boy's encounter with the undead and his subsequent transformation, is purely a work of fiction, crafted from the darker corners of imagination. Our third story, Mercy's Shadow, here lies our true tale. The haunting account of the Brown family's tragedy in Exeter, Rhode Island, is based on real events. In the late 19th century, due to the lack of understanding of diseases like tuberculosis and heightened by local superstitions, Mercy Brown was indeed believed to be a vampire by her community. The exhumation of her body and the ritualistic burning of her heart are well-documented events in Rhode Island's history. The tale of Mercy Brown remains one of America's most famous historical accounts of vampire folklore.
Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, else maybe a vampire will visit you tonight while you sleep.